So,
Awesome, brother.
okay.
All right. We're live, dude. I wanted to say thanks, man, for being the 10th guest on the Waking Warrior Veterans podcast. We've got Blake, my good friend. We did some ceremonies together. We spent some time in Medellin together.
hmm
And I've always respected your participation in the men's group and what I've gotten to know about you. And the purpose of the Waking Warrior Veterans podcast is to really get a good sense of who you are as a person and really dig into your story, because as veterans, we don't often share our stories very often. And I just want to give you a space to do that. So, let you take the stage and just talk about yourself and maybe your early life and kind of what drew you into the military and some things you experienced during it. There's a lot of stuff that I'm sure we can dig into and a couple of ideas of where I want this to go, but I'll let you just
hmm
take the stage, man, and tell the people about you. Who is Blake and where did you come from?
Thanks, Scottie. I appreciate that, brother. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
This is something I don't do often. So we'll see how this comes out. Talking about myself. My story is something I've been, I guess, trying to understand myself. I feel like it's really easy it's really easy to like hear about other people and kind of put things into context through like the relationships that we have with others. But like the older I've gotten, I'm 29, so really not that old, but I feel like, I'm still putting the pieces together of my early life. um, so, so yeah, I appreciate you having me here. I guess starting off, um, so yeah, well, I'll start back in childhood, I guess, before like the military. Yeah, so I grew up in the Midwest, St. Louis, Missouri, Midwestern town, flyover states, then moved to Indiana in high school. My parents split up, divorced when I was about 10. And my father actually got custody of myself and my siblings. I have triplet siblings. I'm not a triplet. I'm the older brother to the triplets. And so we moved to live with my dad in Indiana when I was about 12. So kind of middle or early adolescent years. And I think when I kind of think about how I got into the military, and like some of my, I guess reasoning behind wanting to serve is I think I always felt like as a child I had to prove myself.
Mm,
Um, I think my relationship with my father, like I was very fortunate to have parents, um, both parents that loved and like nurtured me, but I think there was still a lot of disconnects with my parents, especially after the divorce. And I suffered with like, it doesn't matter what age you are, if you're a kid, you kind of internalize any traumatic event, right? Like especially when it comes to family circumstances, you tend to blame yourself. And so like I think from an early age, I really established a relationship with myself that was one of like being extremely harsh on myself, extremely critical. And part of that came from my relationship with my dad too. My dad, even though he loved me, he was very hard on me as well. I think maybe being the first child or um, just not meeting expectations. So my dad's father, actually, my grandpa Fred, he did serve in the Air Force, and so my family doesn't have like deep ties to the military. I know a lot of folks who serve, come from long lines of or lineages of serving, but wasn't necessarily something that was at the forefront of my family's foundation. But I did have a grandfather who served. He was a police officer in Columbus, Indiana. Didn't get to know him very well before he passed. I mean, I was young. I think he passed when I was 8 or 9 too. Um, but yeah, and then as I grew up, kind of thinking about vocations and what I wanted to do, what I wanted to do, I guess it it dawned on me actually when I was in my undergraduate at Colorado State University, that military service was something that was something that I wanted to do, and an opportunity for me to serve the country that has provided a lot of so much opportunity to everyone who's lived here. And so I kind of did the military thing backwards. I tell most people, because most folks enlist at a younger age, out of high school or kind of later in their teens. it wasn't something that I had truly considered until I was about 20 years old, halfway through my undergraduate. At Colorado State, there's a couple big ROTC programs, both with the Air Force and then Army as well.
Yep.
Colorado's got a lot of military ties. You got the Air Force Academy down in the Springs. I had a couple of roommates who were ROTC, and then I actually dated a woman or girl, Alex Ellison, remembering all the ghosts of girlfriends past, whatever it's called. But she was like the lead commander, or I guess I don't remember the position, but with the Army ROTC group there at CSU. And so, had a lot of influences around me, friends and community at Colorado State. And, it was something that really just was, I commended all my friends who were in that program. So it took a lot of dedication, a lot of time, and they're also setting themselves up for what I viewed as like a bright future, going, graduating, becoming an officer. But at that time, when I had kind of started to think that this might be a path for me, for at least ROTC wise, I was already a junior in my undergraduate. So, they required you to do the full 4 years. So it was a little late for that. So I did the next best thing that I could. And that was to enlist in I enlisted in the Colorado Air National Guard my junior year. And the Guard's a little bit different than active duty. It's kind of like delayed entry. So it was about a year after I joined and after I graduated CSU when I left for basic training down in Texas. Where am I going? Thinking back all the details. And so, I guess that was kind of the start of my I guess military career. I did actually, between graduation and going to basic, I worked for about a half year with a corporate construction firm as well. So it's like, I wanted to serve, but I was still kind of like, I viewed it as an opportunity to do something that was like more meaningful and also more just exciting than going straight into the workforce. Most folks who go to undergraduate kind of go immediately into the workforce, and then that's your life. I think I was looking for more excitement, more adventure. So I actually enlisted to be a crew chief on the F-16s out at Buckley Air Force Base outside of Denver. But going through MEPS, they run all those tests on you, and personally, I think it was a mistake. But they said my hearing in my right ear was like a couple points off, so they wouldn't let me join. I didn't qualify for being a crew chief because your hearing had to be at a certain level, and I was pretty bummed, to be honest, when I got the results back from MEPS, and they kind of gave me the choice of, hey, we've got a couple other openings, or you can just kind of walk away. But for whatever reason, it was still nagging at my heart that this is something I wanted to do. So I ended up kind of getting in touch with their fire program, or fire protection services in the Air Force, and enlisted as a it's been so long I forget my AFSC or MOS, but fire protection services. Went down to Texas, trained for about a year, both in basic and then in tech school. Lived in San Angelo, middle of nowhere, Texas, and and then basically served the next 4 years on and off in the Colorado Air National Guard. But I think that was right about when I left for basic. How old was I? I was about 22. So starting to develop more, starting to like understand who I was as an adult, and starting to consider more of like my values in life. And I think it's funny, like early on after I got to basic, like I think I knew pretty early on after actually getting into the service that it was something that just wasn't necessarily going to serve me. I think let's see how I can articulate this, but I've always been more of a free thinking type of individual. And I think from the outside looking in, the military to me appealed to me because it was an opportunity to serve and to give back. And like, I think in my heart, my parents, mostly my stepmother, actually, she's really like instilled the value of like service to others, like in life. That's what life's all about, like giving and showing up for your communities and just the people, you're around in life. And for me, I wanted to get back to just, my country, for all the people that have served before us and given us opportunities that we have today. But yeah, man, I feel like, I don't know, putting the uniform on for me was, I felt like, and maybe it's because it's guard service too. After like your full year of training, basic and tech school, you're pretty much kind of a part-time, weekend warrior type of status, and just that balance between like civilian life and then like putting the uniform on once in a blue moon felt kind of fake. It felt pretty fake to me, and I felt like I wasn't really showing up. Like, I guess don't exactly know how to articulate the feeling, but I felt like I was.
It wasn't like a complete. It sounds like it wasn't like a complete identity transformation. Like when you go into the normal service, is like it takes over your entire identity. Like, I am a soldier, and so it sounds like what you were struggling with maybe was this idea of like, I'm a part-time soldier and a part-time civilian, and that was kind of hard to juxtapose.
Yeah, the balance between the two. Definitely a lot of imposter syndrome for sure as well. Felt like I was, forcing myself to be someone who I wasn't. I I was fortunate to have like, a lot of there's some really good counselors actually in my unit, and I kind of spoke to them about my reservations, like where I was feeling. I just felt like I wasn't honestly supposed to be wearing the uniform. Like I didn't deserve it. Nor was the work that we were doing in my, in my unit. It wasn't, it's a lot of training on the fire grounds, but, all the kind of indoctrination, all the, just the formalities of the military and all this. I always kind of had this feeling in the back of my mind, like whatever we were doing was just like not conforming to something that like wasn't going to serve me in the way that I wanted to, or wasn't going to be a good outcome, I guess. I felt like, from a early, wow, it's like difficult for me to talk about this, but yeah, I clearly I still carry shame about my like experience in the military, to be honest. And I think a lot of the the listeners, they'll have their own opinions, but I feel like it was just something that I realized. I think I like to say like I kind of had like an awakening, I guess, after getting back to Colorado, after going through basic and tech school, that like, thinking about the military as a whole, like the idea is to be a force that protects and defends, like, our homeland and all that. And I just kind of realized that I think like borders and just like war, the concept of war as a whole, like borders are man-made things. War is a construct that is, in my opinion, here on this planet because, like the consciousness of humanity hasn't shifted to the point yet where, where we're not recognizing the fact that, we're all here on this planet. Mostly like we're different skin colors, we come from different families, we live in different parts of the world, but at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we're all, I think, here for love and here for connection and here for, I think service to others in some regard. And I think like, sure, I understand like there's good and evil in the world, and somebody has to protect against the evil. And I think that's partially, why the military does exist, because, it's not, the world isn't all sunshine and rainbows, but I just couldn't get myself to believe that I was meant to be here to wear this uniform and potentially get deployed and go, go overseas and do whatever we were going to do wherever we were stationed. I never did deploy. The guard does like rotational units, and before I got out, I missed the deployment right before I got out, and we were basically just going to go be stationed in, I think, Kuwait, probably just sitting on a tarmac. But where am I going with this? Yeah, I think
it sounds like as so you get into just kind of reframing the last kind of bit of your story. So you were originally attracted to the military and the Air Force specifically because your parents had instilled in you this idea of serving. And you originally thought, like your initial thought was, hey, the military seems like a good way to give back to the country that's given me so much, and in a way that is helping people. And when you got into basic training, admittedly a little bit late, so you're starting to formulate a different set of values. And when you get into the real experience, you're like, for me, this isn't what I expected. And the things that the Air Force is doing, the way in which we're training, the inculcation and the brainwashing, for lack of a better term, this is actually not what I thought it was. And as a matter of fact, it seems to me to be actively harmful.
That's a great articulation. And that it's mostly true for me. I think, we oftentimes, we don't know what we don't know until you're actually, in the thick of experience. And I think, especially as I was going through training, I could kind of see through all the I understood why they had to break you down to build you up, because, it's like, you do have to have a complete identity shift. And I think at that point in my life or my maturity stage, like I'd already been able to kind of think for myself, think independently. And it was just very difficult for me to comply and to, obviously I got through basic. I was actually like I had to lead my flight actually, because I was one of the older members who went through, and you learn a lot about yourself, about showing up and leading a group of 60 men. So I learned a lot, about leadership and discipline and all that, but it's like, it was all forced and fake. And for me, it was just like, I don't know why I'm doing this, because I don't even want to be here. I don't want to serve in this way. I think it was a lot to do with just, I felt like the curve, I'd been like I don't know. The way I thought was just not, I would always question things, overanalyze. It's like the kind of old adage, if it makes sense, we kind of do the opposite or we don't do it. And it's just like, I think for me, just a lot of questioning, and a lot of like wondering like what the military actually was after I got into it.
It sounds like a really hard process to go through, right? Because this is happening at the same time you're establishing yourself and your own identity, and you're not full in on the military identity. Because like this would probably be a different discussion maybe if you were full in military all the time, right? Because then it's kind of gotcha. And so it sounds like
I could go back between my normal life and military life, which was made it even more difficult.
Yeah, that seems really rough. And so now, okay, you're like, I don't want to be here anymore. What happened? Like, I guess, first of all, what were sort of the challenges in that? Because the military fighting sort of this inculcation brainwashing strategy that's like the Air Force and the military, the best thing since sliced bread, and everything we're doing is for freedom and all this good stuff. So how did that feel like when you realized that I don't want to be here anymore and I don't think we're doing good?
Yeah, it felt, it was frightening really, because, as well as I do, Scottie, you were in for a lot longer than I, but it's like, once you sign that dotted line, you're in, and there's really no going back. And, you see the guys, the recruits at basic that, they try to, they say they're going to break, they've broken something, or they're just like have a psychotic break because they just don't want to deal with the hardships of the military. But it's like, for me, I was, it was a rough time. I didn't really know where to turn at first. I had a lot of shame and like difficulty opening up to my leadership about this, and then counseling. I felt like basically like I'd failed myself. I'd failed, my country for basically signing up to serve, and then realizing, wait a minute, like this is not what I thought I was signing up for, nor is it something I see myself doing. But I've still got to show up and at least like pretend for the drill weekends and the trainings that we all showed up for. But I think I was really there was one master sergeant that I could confide in, and I was really grateful for his support. He was basically the leader of our training unit, and yeah, he heard me out, and I think it came to him about a year or so after I was in the unit. And I think he was initially confused too, because on paper I was a great enlistee. I showed up to training. I did everything I was supposed to. And so I think there's a lot of confusion. Like, why would you, why would you not want to be here? Why would you not want to show up? It's also in a firefighting unit too. You've got a lot of guys who are very, a lot of the guys who are firefighters in the military, they're also firefighters in the civilian world. And, I did have the aspirations at one point as I was going through training to try to pursue that on the civilian side. But COVID actually kind of threw that for a wrench, and then, life kind of changed. But I think, my master sergeant was looking at me like, oh, this is a young recruit who, has the opportunity to go be a firefighter on the outside. And like, that's like what everybody in this unit is like, that's the purpose. We're all here. And then obviously to deploy when we're, called to deploy. And, I think it's like, I think there's a lot of confusion from my master sergeant. And then, I tried to open up to my lieutenant colonel in our unit as well. And he's just like, sorry, bud, like, you made the decision, you gotta stay with it. And it's like, okay, I understand. And then I also had, I had some counseling that was available to me, but it's just like, felt like an imposter, and I felt super just ashamed for a couple years. And then I would go to counseling regularly, but didn't really have any solutions for a while. And then it was 2024, 2025. I think it's 2025. No, I'm sorry. What are we talking about? If we're not in the future, 2022. When it's like post-COVID, or no, it's 2021. Man, my dates are all messed up. I don't know what time it is, but
sorry, man. All good.
Time is an illusion, huh?
Indeed.
But,
that's for the next podcast. Muggles not invited.
We haven't quite gotten there yet, have we? COVID happened, and then in the Guard there was kind of a big mass exodus for individuals who denied the vaccine. And I had been, my counselor and my master sergeant, they're aware of how I'd been kind of feeling for the past 2-3 years, basically, since I've been serving in the unit. And my counselor basically proposed the idea to me. Instead of, I guess backing up a little bit, I was pretty desperate at the time. It's like, I knew I didn't want to serve. I knew I didn't want to be in my unit. And I had broached the idea with my counselor about the idea of like conscientious objection for, as like the medical classification to truly be disqualified from the Air Force. And so we're kind of looking into that, but that's a pretty long, arduous process. There
aren't very many. There may be like 100, 200, and maybe a few hundred maximum a year out of the
if you're familiar with it, it's like your application goes to the Pentagon. They sit down with you and run you through all the psychological evals and all these things. It just sounded like overkill. And so we were kind of like entertaining that idea for a while, but then COVID kind of happened out of nowhere, and my counselor brought up the idea of just hey, it's just say you denied the vaccine, you can get out basically on a other than honorable discharge. So That's what I ended up doing after 4 years. So I ended up basically serving 4 out of 6 years of my contract, which, is still pretty unheard of, getting out early. So I kind of viewed that as my silver lining in the whole thing, because I was pretty, honestly, like my mental health, my health suffered for many years, mostly like the mental stuff, the stress, anxiety, it all stuck with me, and then eventually manifested itself in the body too. And when I got out, the last year that I was in the Air Force, I had some major gut health issues, and even in the year following after I discharged, lots of gut issues, which affected energy levels, affected just the way I thought about myself, depression, anxiety, on the whole gamut, and lots of like, self-worth, self-love issues concerns came about as well, because it's just like, I still felt like a failure for kind of putting myself through that experience. But at the end of the day, I am the one who signed the dotted line, and I am the one who ended up getting myself out. And I don't regret it at all. Like, it's gotten me to, I think, some of the best experiences in life are the most challenging, the most trying. And for me, although I never, went to the battlefield and never was participated in active war, I just know that I think, like, the way I thought I could just project out, like, if I had to go out and participate in that, I just know I would have been probably pretty fucked up, because my value system just did not align with that of going out and doing what we have to do to defend our country. I think
I think it's important to also note that, like, there are going to be a lot of people that don't really understand why you made the decisions you made, but at the overall view of things, like, less than 0.4% of people are on active military duty or ever serve in the military. I think the closer number is something like 1% of people serve. So that would include you, and you served, and you served, 4 years. So it's like, I mean, at some point it doesn't resonate with everybody, and that's totally fine. And regardless of how you get out, like, you did serve. I guess, like, for those of us that are listening to your story, can you tell us a little bit more specifically about why you were not resonating with the military? Or maybe, was it the purpose? Was it the things that we were doing? Was it the conflicts that we were in? What was it?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I earlier I was kind of alluding to this, like, kind of awakening that I had. And I'm 29. I grew up I was really young when, we were in Iraq, and then kind of watched the whole Afghanistan war unfold in my younger days, early teens. And for me, I just kind of came to question, as I was later in my teens and early 20s, starting to just question, really, just this first time in my life I actually thought about, like, okay, why were we actually participating in those wars? And started to question everything I'd been fed through media, through just society, really. Like, we grow up and it's like, okay, military is great, rah rah, like, freedom, America, it's a land of opportunity. But I think for me, I'm very contrarian by nature, and I just started to question the validity of what I'd been fed. And after joining, after, like, wearing the uniform and going through basic, I kind of just easily saw that, like, we could just be, or at least this is obviously my opinion, this is how I felt, but, like, we could be manipulated to join this conglomerate of, this sect of society that is the military, that, is basically, here to do whatever the government wills us to do. And I think it's funny, like, talking about freedom, it's like just freedom of thought and freedom of individuality. Like, I felt like once you join the military, like, your freedom's pretty much completely taken away, and you're subject to somebody else's vision, somebody else's ideology for your life. And I think I started to question started questioning what my own country's intentions were for me, really.
Hmm.
You know, why are we participating in these wars? Why are we actually over in the Middle East? What is the meaning behind everything we're doing? And on paper, yeah, you know, they make it look very heroic, very you know, like it's something that's necessary. It's a necessary evil, but I think my mind, for whatever reason, just went to the place of like, no, like what they're feeding me is actually a bunch of bullshit, and I don't buy it, and I don't resonate with I don't resonate with going out and killing others just for the sake of um, you know, expanding our resources around the world, and for putting our ideologies on other countries when it's not even wanted. And so yeah, I think a lot of that, it was just yeah, it's just funny, the timing of it all. It's like, had I been younger when I joined, 16, 17, I think I probably wouldn't have even realized these things until I gotten out or what have you. But it's just yeah, I think for me, without truly knowing, I just felt like something in my gut, something wasn't right for me.
Hmm.
And so, you know, I don't, that probably might not resonate with a lot of folks, but that's also part of my story too, is like learning how to, I got a lot of shame for me for thinking the way I did. And so I was always concerned, like when I was at drill or at training, like I felt like people like knew too, like looking at me like, oh, he's like an objector, he's not one of us, or he doesn't believe. And
Oh, that's like
you know, it's
mental
just,
and spiritual torture, man, to go through that for a couple of years.
yeah, yeah. And I think it was, I definitely and yeah, it was. And after, you know, for many years, I still really suffered with just mental anguish and mental, I think, like confusion around the whole experience. And just like after I got out, I was like, wow, like what the hell was that? Like literally 4 years of like kind of faking it to make it, I guess. And
Yeah.
the body doesn't lie after a while, or like you can't you can't do it for that long, you know.
Yeah,
And
there's severe consequences that happen. You're like when you're under mental anguish or anxiety or depression or that sort of thing, it really has an
yeah,
effect on the body, or, you know, physically over the long term. I know how
yeah,
hard this is. I can feel how hard this is to talk about, man. And I want to just say, like, take a pause to like thank you for doing this, because I know it's vulnerable and I know it's difficult to talk about, and it doesn't really matter at the end of the day who resonates with it or doesn't resonate or agrees or doesn't agree, because it's your story. And I think
yeah,
a part of maybe dealing with and getting past this shame is the recognition that, like, you should be proud of the fact, even if the service wasn't what you thought it would be, the fact that you served for 4 years and were alongside men and women that you know, that had ideally good intentions. So,
yeah,
like, whether, no matter how we get out or how long we serve or if we deployed or didn't deploy, we all, as veterans, I think, need to realize that we have different things that we deal with. And so it could
yeah,
be you going through identity crises and imposter syndrome, and wanting to get out because you didn't agree with the way the war was going or what we were doing in the world. And for another person, it's going to be imposter syndrome and dealing with survivor's guilt because they couldn't deploy because they got injured. That was me, right? So I got injured,
yeah,
and I was having similar, like through West Point, similar thoughts, and was doing a lot of research into what we're actually doing around the world. And I was like, fuck, this doesn't sound good, right? But I
mm-hmm.
was kind of full in by that point, and so I kind of put that to the side. It didn't generate in me the same sort of challenges that it did in you, probably for a variety of reasons. But I felt a lot of survivor's guilt and imposter syndrome when I got out, because I was a slick sleeve, never deployed military officer that got injured like a dumbass by wandering around in Alaska and froze a toe and a half off. And so I think that when we think of like military members going through imposter syndrome or PTSD or anxiety or depression, we think of the infantry guy who's been banging down doors and, you know,
Yeah,
picking up a body of his best friend like in Ziploc bags. Like, that happens too, but it's no
mm-hmm.
less impactful to have a trauma that comes from a different source. And so I'm personally very glad that we're talking about this, because I know that you're not the only person that's felt this way. And if it resonates with 1 out of a million, that person is going to be able to look at this story and see your courage and how you're explaining it, and is going to resonate with that, and that's going to help somebody.
I appreciate that, brother. That reminds me of like it's like if you're in the healing space, I've probably heard of the little T versus big T trauma. I feel like my story is definitely much more little T trauma, but
I hate that, by the way. I think it's a horrible metric and our methodology framework.
No, exactly. It's like, it's all the same at the end of the day. But
you got big T trauma? I guess you're better. Like, it's a shitty thing to win at, man.
P capital TSD, not P little TSD. It's like, no, it's all the same shit. But I feel like, that being said too, I don't I certainly met and have great relationships with a lot of my brothers and sisters in the military, and I respect the hell out of everyone who's served and the people that I did serve alongside too. I hope it's not being taken in the sense that I don't respect those that serve. It's really just the whole idea and the system behind the veil, really.
Yeah, I don't think anyone with a reasonably open mind would interpret that at all. So you get out of the military by the max exodus is happening with the COVID pandemic. What do you feel like when you first get out, and what was your transition process in the first year or two? Like, walk me through that.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. It was actually really simple. I mean, I remember literally going to like the DEER's office, processing, and just basically handing over my CAT card, forfeiting, signing paperwork to forfeit all the benefits, all that stuff, and literally.
Did you have to sign over your Air Force office chair? Like, don't they issue you one of those?
Didn't stick around long enough. What's up, Chewy? What's up, Bubbers? Just that soul. Look at him.
Chew's been taking a nap.
Best dog in the world. Unfortunately, I never became an officer, so they didn't. That wasn't part of the enlisted package, but had to hand over the keys back to the man, and basically drove off base, and that was it. And it was just like, it was surreal. It was like, I felt like I didn't even, it took a while to even recognize like, okay, that was actually like truly free and to having my life back. But it was just like, I don't know. It's like graduating without graduating. Like, you just like walk. It's basically like without. I don't know. It was.
Like, what were you doing? Did you have a job kind of like after that you just kind of transitioned to? Like, what were you doing for work?
Yeah, I had gotten into like roofing sales in Colorado at the time, and basically, I was doing that part time while I was serving, and then after I exited, basically just took that on full time for the next season, and put my head down and got to work really, because obviously no one joins the military for the pay, and I had an opportunity to make some better money for a little bit, but I think I basically put my head down and worked and just ignored everything that I was feeling, because I still was carrying all the shame, this regret, this anxiety with me. My health wasn't honestly in the greatest shape. I was in a relationship with a woman at the time as well, and I think it was pretty evident that I wasn't showing up like I wanted, like how it was not a very healthy relationship. Wasn't showing up how I wanted to show up, and I think a lot of it was due to the stress that I was kind of still carrying with me, and still getting clear on like what the path ahead was. Like, the opportunity that I had with roofing was basically just kind of a stepping stone to something else, and I just knew that I needed to make money. So I put my head down and focused on that for about the next year. Then actually got into solar sales as well, but like completely disacknowledging, or completely just like, yeah, basically kind of like putting the military stuff in the past and it's like, okay, that was that. And without even realizing I was still carrying a lot of the baggage with me. And
Yeah, it sounds
so I
like
think,
almost like compartmentalization, kind of like just not even dealing with it, just kind of moving past and kind of focusing on, okay, well, I'm going to throw myself into productive activities. Was that kind of it?
yeah, basically get back to work. Like that experience was that experience. And now you've got to provide for yourself and your future. So it's time to get to work. And eventually that met a crossroads or came to a head 2 years after I separated. That's when I actually met Carl, who Scottie, who was in the Medellin as well. And I got introduced to him and got basically kind of involved in men's work because Carl could kind of easily pick up on the fact that I wasn't really living from my true. He could tell I was carrying a lot of stuff with me, and he helped me to identify like the emotional stress and emotional kind of trauma that I was kind of dealing with. And that was my first introduction to kind of breath work, meditation, just embodiment practices, getting back into the body too. I think the health issues that I had at the time, the gut health issues, partially were present because I was really disconnected from my body because I didn't have a strong relationship with self-love. So I didn't love myself. So I didn't really pay attention to, I guess, myself. And yeah, I think, even just talking about right now, I still need to kind of like still processing, I guess, what happened. But I felt like it was very necessary meeting Carl because he helped me to realize that like, hey, like you need to slow down. Like you're going to burn out and work if you're just continuing to focus on money. You need to focus on yourself and heal some things that are going on that you're carrying with you from your past in the military, but also even before that. So yeah, and since then I've kind of been on this healing path now for about the last for the last 3 or so years. And yeah, it's just talking about it right now. I think I still haven't fully processed everything. I think that's what's interesting about the healing journey too, is like, you know, I even have I have a problem with the term healing journey because I feel like everyone's on their healing journey. We're all, wherever you're at, like you're always every experience you've had is always going to be a part of you in some regard. And it's like, how can you turn, that PTSD or that traumatic experience that you had into something positive or into something that is at least allowing you to like move forward and basically grow from it. And I think like that's kind of where I've been the last 6 months, last year, is basically like looking at that 4 years of my life, like, hey, like, it wasn't where you wanted to be. It wasn't necessarily happy time in life or a time where you, were thriving, but I think it forced me to go through it forced me to kind of understand myself at a deeper level and understand that, at the end of the day, like we all have agency, I think, over our lives. And I think like it's on us to, even in like tough situations, to really kind of take action however we can. And for me, while I was in the military, it was getting help and talking with counselors and being open with my leadership about the things I was experiencing, even though I couldn't necessarily get the outcome that I wanted at the time, which was basically just discharging or separating. And yeah, I just think that like, had I not had those experiences, then I I don't know where I'd be. I think,
Yeah.
I'm actually like, grateful for the challenges that I went through, because it allowed me to deepen like my relationship with myself at the end of the day. And being comfortable speaking like my truth. I think growing up, like, I don't know, there's a lot of perfectionistic and people pleasing kind of tendencies that I used to abide by, and from childhood early on, and just I guess in the military too, not wanting to let people know that, I was an objector, but yeah, it's important to speak the truth. So I think, yeah, the men's work component has been like very big for me. Carl, I worked on it with him one-on-one for a little bit, and then was part of one of his group containers, and then that's what led me to Columbia, where we met too. And it's been really amazing to see all the communities that are present down there. And I know you've got your new community you're working on too, Scottie. So I think it's wonderful what you're doing. I know a lot of men and women in the military, they go through extremely difficult, dark times. And I think it's really, community is really, at the end of the day, I think especially what everybody needs, but especially what veterans need to,
I agree.
quote unquote, heal, because, that's the foundation of the military too, is having your brothers and sisters by your side. And I think it can be a pretty scary place getting out alone too. That's something I also felt after I'd separated. Like, I felt very alone and isolated for a long time, and like I couldn't open up with folks about it. And whatever it is that you experience in the military or out, like, I think it's always good to have a community around you. So I appreciate you kind of leading up and kind of leading the charge on this new vision that you have with your.
I appreciate that, man. Yeah, it's really important that, like, and part of that, like in the healing community, like the work that we do in psychedelics, is like this idea of like holding space for people, realizing that people have different paths and they're going to heal in different ways. And this is very much that work, right? So it's like, this feeling of like, one of the fundamental things that I believe I know about the world that's true for me is this idea that when something triggers us, it's a reflection, it's a mirror, right? So I'm kind of putting myself in the shoes of someone watching this that's like a diehard military supporter and that feels angered or triggered by the things that you're talking about and sharing vulnerably and from the heart. And I guess my encouragement and challenge to those people would be, if you're triggered by this story, ask yourself, what doubts did you have about your military service and your place in it? And did you choose to fully pursue your doubts and pursue those to their logical conclusion, or did you shove them to the side? And if you're being triggered by this story, maybe there's a little bit of that in there. This idea of like, and I'm pissed off because this guy did what I may have secretly wanted to do in some little corner of my heart, And I think this is going to be such a valuable, useful example. You never know. And having the courage to ask yourselves those questions, regardless of the answer, I think is a sign of healing and a sign of, I'm willing to do the work. So I'm grateful from that perspective. I'm curious, on your healing path, what things did you find that helped you get to a better place, that helped you combat that imposter syndrome or the lack of community?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, getting back to community, really. I think I largely self-isolated, which didn't help my my kind of circumstances, but eventually opening up with like close friends about kind of the experience that I went through, and then just being more open about sharing my story. I kind of slowly opened up with some of my closer friends in Colorado at the time, and then family as well. Fortunately, my family, they supported me throughout the whole journey. But I've got cousins that serve. I have a cousin who's just now about to get out of the Army, but he's served for multiple contracts, and it's like, just even being open with a fellow brother and a fellow family member who served too. I think I always had shame and fear around showing up truthfully or showing up and presenting my story in the most authentic light. But with specifically for me, I guess with the just under like the emotional component, understanding my emotions, the tools that I was basically being taught with in the men's work community, like basically just like self-embodiment kind of practices, breath work, emotional release breath work, releasing, energy that's been stuck and stored for long periods of time. breathwork was an incredible tool, and that's huge in Medellin. I'm in Austin, Texas now. I feel like everyone down here is pretty into the breathwork space, which is really cool. And then community too. Starting to find community outside of the Air Force as well, or Air Guard, and plugging myself in with friends and family when I was living in Denver, but since in the last year and a half, I really like a big reason I moved to Columbia when I met you, Scottie, was to actually be part of that kind of men's community that Carl created, which now is kind of evolving and shifting a little bit. But to meet other men on their journeys, I feel called in some way to be a present member in other like the lives of younger men in particular, because I think whether in the military or not, I think there's lots of confusion out there right now around how to show up in the world as a man. And I'm not saying women have their fair share of problems as well. I think the society as a whole is in my opinion kind of a transformational time, and I think like community is really the heart of it. I think modern Western society would tell you that like it's kind of about the pursuit of individualism, and making, or as a man, making as much money as you can for yourself, so you can eventually provide for your family or your future, what have you. But I really sought out to be closer to individuals who are kind of like on my path in the last year and a half now, and found that in Columbia and have found that in Austin in the last 2 months that I've been down here. And I think like going forward, I strive to just continue to like not self-isolate any longer. I didn't cover this earlier, but I took about a like 6 month or so sabbatical, and at the beginning of 2023 moved to Hawaii, remote island, worked on a coffee farm, and basically kind of just lived a very slow life, and connected to nature a lot, and just slowed things down. And then came back to Colorado, lived in a small little A-frame cabin in the mountains outside of Boulder. And so for me, like, silence and stillness and slowness was really healing for me. But eventually it came to the point where it's like, okay, I've had this slow period and this, introspective period. And I think it's time for me to reintegrate into community and actually being a present member in the world at a larger scale. So I think like there's a time and a place to go to the woods and go to nature and go find God. But I think the point of having those experiences, and those experiences are definitely a privilege, is so you can reintegrate at some point. And that's kind of where I'm at this moment. So
that's beautiful. So like men's work and sort of connecting to community seemed to be things that really kind of drove you and were a good source of healing.
Absolutely. Yep.
Nice, brother.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone, a service member that is perhaps struggling with what they did in the military or the reasons why they were doing it?
Yeah, just the most important thing is to know that you're not alone, and don't think for a second you're alone, because there's certainly other servicemen and women out there that may have similar feelings to you, but don't be afraid to seek out support too. Because I was ashamed, and to be honest, very afraid to open up with my leadership and the counseling support and support and mentorship that I had within my unit. But had I not done that, I think my depression was so severe at times, I don't even know if I'd be here right now, to be honest. And it's really all about being vulnerable enough to open up to somebody that you can confide in, whether that's, a member in your unit or somebody, like I said, in your leadership. And if it's not somebody in your unit or even in the military, like just talk to somebody. Because I think that can help. You can get clarity and get guidance on like kind of what your next steps are. So I'd say just definitely remember you're not alone. You're never alone.
No matter what it is, literally, no matter what it is, you're never alone. Like somebody somewhere is going to identify that with you, and that not addressing the problem leads to anxiety, depression, suicide, a lot of challenges that we would prefer you not face. So it doesn't matter
Absolutely.
if you killed somebody, or you're thinking about it, or you want to get out of the army because you hate the things we're doing. It doesn't matter. Whatever it is,
Right.
it's always better if we talk about it. And so part of what this Waking Warrior community exists as is a place where you can do that without judgment. Reach out to me for help, reach out to Blake for help, reach out to people, and we'll get you the help you need, regardless of whatever it is, because it always looks like worse before you talk about it. Would that be an accurate thing to say?
Absolutely. Our mind can paint a million pictures of false realities that can happen in the future when we're living in kind of that fear and anxiety state. And oftentimes the reality is nowhere near as bad as you think it's going to be, just by opening up and kind of taking action instead of ruminating on whatever thoughts you're going through. So yeah, resonate with that one, Scottie, for sure.
Awesome, man. I couldn't agree more, brother. Anything
Yeah.
else you wanna cover or delve into? I feel like I know this has been challenging for you, man. And I just want to thank you again for that. I'm open if you want to dig into anything else, but you also might need a break.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll say, obviously I didn't go into 100% depth, on the show today, but, if anybody is, happens to resonate or is curious or wants to ask more, I'm happy to kind of go in deeper offline as well. It's definitely, still kind of analyzing and still processing, even at 29, when I was in over 5 years ago now, kind of what happened, but always happy to connect one-on-one too. So with anyone in the community, but other than that, I think we've hit everything that's worthwhile sharing today. So I appreciate you having this space and hosting or just creating this space for conversations like this. I think it's really important. So
It's my pleasure, brother. I appreciate it, man.
yeah,
Let me stop us here and close us out and say that whatever you're dealing with, please talk to us about it. We're here as a community, and our community is a bunch of individuals, and we all come from different backgrounds, thinking different things. So we're going to get you the help you need, and don't suffer in silence. That's the biggest thing. So please don't do that.
I hope.